And welcome to episode 28, guys. If you can't see, I look a little tired over here, and it's because I had 4 screens going on last night until about 1 in the morning. I think that Colorado K-State game kept me up till, and it was a hell of a night in college football. One of the reminders of exactly why we love this sport, and there's a lot to talk about. So much to talk about that we're not going to dive in detail as much today on like these particular games. It's more of a broad overview of what the hell just happened in college football, because we had a lot of shakeup, we had a lot of great games, we had a lot of storylines. So we kind of want to touch them all today. So Mitch, I know you and your pops were watching some football last night and having a hell of a time. But what'd you think of yesterday, dude, in the slate yesterday?
It was an awesome slate. Yeah, I got to spend a lot of time with my mom, my dad, and my pup, just watching ball, making some food, and enjoying each other's company, which has been cool, man. This fall has looked a lot different for me. Definitely a lot. I woke up yesterday, made some banana chocolate chip bread with my mom. Went and got a little workout in, and then came back and sat on my couch all day with my parents. So definitely a different vibe this fall, but I've been thankful for it. But yeah, what a hell of a slate we had, dude. I mean, there were great games in the noon slate, the 3:30 slate, the 7:30 slate. I mean, it was all day, just awesome football games. So super thankful as a fan.
Well, and we're in week 7. I hate having to listen to you say, like, as a fan, because I know how well you can still play it, and I know you still got your days ahead here. So
come on, man. We'll be back soon. We'll be back soon.
But I think the people care, dude. It's week 7, and you're still in your seasons of eligibility here, and you have intentions of playing ball. So it's beautiful to take the deep breath and spend that time with your family and make some chocolate chip bread and all of the deal. But where's our meter here on how balanced we are between like enjoying family and enjoying watching, and also like, dog, I have to watch with the helmet on half the time. Like where are we at right now?
Honestly, a lot less chill, more chill than I thought I'd be. I think just because I knew that this break was necessary. So all this extra time that I'm getting off with my family and my friends and being at home, I'm not taking it for granted. I've really enjoyed it. Now, when I'm out working out, I'm out throwing and lifting, I'm getting amped up, and I got my music in my earphones, and like I get pretty fired up, and that's when I kind of get my juices flowing. But when I'm watching, I haven't watched college football, dude, in like 5 years. So it's really been easy to sit back and watch it. But there are definitely some games, especially when I watch Wake play. Like when I watch my buddies out there playing and all my friends out there, that's when I'm like, all right, dude, I would kill to play in a game right now. So it's
I would kill to watch you play again, and I know that's coming here. We've talked at length about that. Now, as you think of yesterday's games, like I have, the slate, and we're gonna go through the order of the slate. But as you just think off the top of your dome right now, like what was the big 1 or 2 or things that you remember from yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I thought obviously the Red River Rivalry game is always super anticipated, and I mean ended up being a blowout, which I kind of expected. But after the initial turnover by Texas, it could have got interesting. But really, the big game for me that I loved watching was the Ole Miss LSU game. That was an awesome SEC game. So super fun to watch. And I know you were watching all the games, same games I was watching. We were texting back and forth. And but what were your favorite games you were watching? There were some good ones.
Dude, I think just the intensity of a lot of those games in the late fourth quarter, like just you and I have talked at length about like my favorite games to watch are the ones where the best player's best is required. Like, and I felt like with everything on the line, like I said, the 4 screens is like, you had a couple at 2:30 that were legit. You had a couple at the late slate that were, I mean, you had like 4 or 5 in the late slate that were great. But I think just watching big plays be made like at big moments everywhere was just, I think we got to see who some teams were like behind the curtain yesterday. And like, I think that's what's really exciting. So as we start at the top of the list, dude, you got to go with the number 1 team in the country right now. And the team that probably, and they got a stiff test coming into town this week, which is going to be really exciting to watch, because I would almost argue that if you start the game the way you started against Oklahoma, against Georgia, from a momentum standpoint, like you may never be able to get back around that one. So they kind of benefited from that early. But as you look at Texas right now, like 34-3 against Oklahoma, and the way that game went, I definitely have some thoughts about it. Mitch, what were your takeaways there, and what were you, as you look at Texas, just in general?
Yeah, quick takeaways is one, Quinn Ewers, first game back in a while, throws a pick early. Could have definitely went through a little bit of a spiral there of being rusty and then throwing a pick in kind of a huge game like that, but stayed calm and played a great game. And I think with Steve Sarkisian's offense, a lot of people expect, airing it out for 400 yards a game, but I think people forget how well Texas runs the ball. I mean, they dominated Oklahoma in their running game. So I think that's something that's really going to help them down the stretch, and those are my two big takeaways from that game.
I love that, dude. Yeah, mine are very, very similar. They were talking about it in the telecast, and then I had known this too, that Sark has made a big deal about recruiting Texas offensive linemen out of high school. And even if he can't get them in the 25 on scholarship, getting them there as walk-ons. And when you look at the depth of the offensive line up front, you have mostly juniors and seniors across the board, which is rare in today's college football. They're all 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and 6'6". And, dude, they average 320 pounds across the board. Yeah. So what I thought was super impressive is, like, Quinn didn't play bad, but that first half was not Quinn Ewers football. And yet they still impose their will at the line of scrimmage. And you look around and we get so, I mean, not us, but like everybody loves watching the skill players so much that we forget sometimes like about what offensive and defensive line are. And Michigan basically pounded people en route to a national championship last year. Yeah. And when you look at this Texas football team, that's why I'm so excited to watch them play Georgia, because like Kirby's defense against that offensive line, it's going to be interesting to watch. But that was my big thing, was just that I didn't think that Quinn played his best game by any means, and they still kicked the shit out of Oklahoma in a rivalry game. So I think it just tells you, even when they don't have their best, they're still up there as one of the top teams in the country, which is obviously going to mean something moving forward. Now, probably the one that the most people watched through yesterday was Ohio State and Oregon. And as you think of that one, Mitch, there were a bunch of things that happened in that game, and you can cut it up a million different ways, a lot of different storylines, lots of stuff that happened. What were your big takeaways from, watching Oregon, Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, first thing that just popped out to me, and I told you this earlier, was I just didn't expect Oregon to be so explosive. And I knew they had a good offense, and Dillon Gabriel is a phenomenal quarterback, and Tez Johnson is a great wide receiver. I just was like, every time I feel like every time I looked down, they were throwing a 50-yard bomb and it was getting caught. Like versus arguably the best defense in the country. So I was just super shocked at how not shocked, but it just how explosive they were with almost ease, And they definitely surprised me. And that was really the first I'd watched them all year. And I'm sure they've had a ton of explosives, and I just don't know it. But to do that versus Ohio State was super impressive. And I know that you said that if you're Ohio State, you're leaving that game kind of feeling good about yourself. And I want you to elaborate on that, because that's not a lot of people probably understand what you mean by that.
Right. So I think for me, like, Mitch and I have talked at length about college football is a game where if anybody watched that Ohio State-Oregon game, like, you felt the guys in Austyn, the fans in Austyn. And when you think about the advantage that plays on a moment-to-moment basis in a tight game, it's a huge advantage, not only just in pre-snap, formational procedure and all of those things, but also just the juice behind what you're doing. Again, you and I have talked about how, like, when you're on that final drive for Ohio State and you hear that noise, it does make it feel like there's 12 guys on defense. And a lot of people won't understand that, but it's just a feeling that you feel. So when I talked about Ohio State, my biggest takeaway of the game is that I think both teams are walking out of that game feeling really good about where they're at. Yeah. And here's the thought behind it is, one, I feel like people have already forgot that Ohio State was in field goal range to kick the game-winning field goal. And they get an OPI call that is like, I'm not here to bitch about refs. That's a tough flag to throw in that situation.
Very tough.
Like a 6'2.5", 6'3", 215-pound receiver, big shoulders a guy on a stop route, and you call OPI. Like, that's a tough call in that situation. And in that situation, that's really Will Howard's a veteran, so he knows I'm not going to take a sack here. Like, you're already in field goal range. So the only thing that could really get you is a 15-yard penalty, maybe a holding call, like in that situation. And so it immediately takes you out of field goal range, and you don't even get the attempt. So, like, I think that that's a big part of it. I think also, I ask you, Mitch, like, again, we don't have a fortune teller's ball in front of us right now, but, like, if that game's played in the Horseshoe last night, like, does Oregon win that game?
Don't know. Like that. And that's the thing. If you ever, just how, Vegas works, if you ever get an even spread and the team's at home, they're going to get 3 points.
Exactly.
So that's how much,
And I think the spread on the game yesterday was 3. So, like,
exactly.
For Ohio State. So
exactly.
if it was at Ohio State, that's like a 6-7 point
exactly.
game
They're
right
probably
there.
Exactly.
And yeah. And so that's what I mean when I talk about leaving the field. I mean, something that we're going to talk about in the quarterback standouts of the week is like, dude, Will Howard. Like,
played awesome.
Played.
Yeah.
And I know that there were some questions about him. You're 28 of 35 for 326 yards on the road in a 2 versus 3 matchup like that.
Versus a Dan Lanning defense.
For those that thought Will Howard was a good player, but I don't know if he can make that next jump, like, that's a hell of a start to making that next jump. So I just think for Ryan Day, he's like, dude, we had it. We had it. We were right there. Of course, we're pissed we lost the game, but we were right there. My quarterback answered a lot of the questions. And so I think on the road, I think you feel good coming out of that game. And we're going to talk about Dylan Gabriel and our quarterback standouts of the week. Dan Lanning is the man. I mean, I was telling my dad, like, if I was a head coach in college football right now, that's the guy I relate to the most. And it's just because of his energy, his intensity, like, he's with it, but he's also not trying to be cool. He just is, kind of. And so I'm a big fan of Dan Lanning. Now you go into the game, it's funny, like, you have had bigger games, I guess, on paper, but the game that you said, like, was the most entertaining was that LSU Ole Miss game. And it's like, tell us why that thing was the most entertaining to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than, like, a SEC clash, dude. Like, it's just, you got the best of the best going head to head, and that's a huge game because if you look at the rest of their schedules, Ole Miss can now no longer lose, and LSU can probably drop one more to get into the playoffs. But that was a playoff football game,
big time.
And again, it came down to the wire. LSU at home in Death Valley at night. I mean, very hard to win. I think their record at home is like, it was something crazy. They had an unbelievable record at night. It was like 109-20 in the last since like 2000.
Yeah.
Like, just unbelievable.
And I know Brian Kelly is undefeated at night at LSU as well.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, just a tough place to play, but just a classic SEC matchup versus 2 really good teams. Again, if I'm Ole Miss, I'm leaving that game, feeling not horrible about myself because they drop a touchdown on the opening drive. They shot themselves in the foot multiple times.
Totally.
But now they got a tough road ahead, and dropping another game is probably going to keep them out of the playoffs, and they're probably feeling a little bit deflated, at this point, thinking that their goals for the year might be out of reach, and they're only halfway through the season, so that's tough. So we'll see.
No question, dude. And the intensity, like you were talking about, night game at LSU, it's when I watch games, like, there are some games that just look different. And when you look at Ohio State, Oregon yesterday, that looked different. There's NFL dudes all over the field, and you can just feel it. The explosiveness, the physicality, all of it. When you watched LSU and those whites and Ole Miss in the darks, like, on a grass field still, like, getting muddy and shit, like, that's the deal. And these guys had a bunch of NFL guys on both rosters, so just a really, really fun game to watch. And we're gonna get into Nuss, in deep detail here in a little bit. But you talk about answering the bell in a situation where your season's on the line and doing it in multiple big down situations in a variety of ways. That's why I think LSU is going to be a problem through the rest of the season, even though they have a couple tough teams left on their schedule, as it is everywhere in the SEC. Kind of a weirder one because we had a couple injuries and some things, but Tennessee and Florida. So Tennessee and Florida played at Tennessee in a night game, another brutal place to play. They had the whole checkerboard going, the white and the orange everywhere, all throughout it. But but a weird game in the sense that, first of all, prayers up, Graham Mertz. It's been a long career, bro. You still have football left ahead of you, but we're all praying for you because that looked like a season ender just in his lower body, and we're going to pray for him. But then you had DJ Lagway come in and, answer the bell. And to be a freshman in that situation and do a couple of things that he did, that's a guy right there now.
Yeah.
And then for those that didn't watch the game, Florida went on a big drive to tie the game up, to send it into overtime. And then Tennessee was able to get them, they didn't get a field goal in the overtime. And then Tennessee was able to score. So anyway, as you looked at that game, Mitch, what did you see in that game as you watched Tennessee, Florida?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, on Florida side, looking at both sides of things, Graham Mertz, prayers for him. Hopefully he's doing okay, and that's definitely a tough situation. We could probably have a 3-hour podcast about what he's going through right now. On the other side, DJ Lagway, I mean, to do that as a freshman and to make some unbelievable plays to keep him in it, super impressive. And, I mean, that kid will win them 3-4 more games this year because he's a dude. He's a dude. And then for Tennessee, man, I don't know. It's crazy because, the first 2-3 weeks of the season, we were so high on Tennessee. Their offense was playing so well, and you almost expect them to score, 50-plus a game. And at home, at night versus Florida, I mean, that's a big one. Don't get me wrong. Tennessee-Florida is a huge rivalry game. But at home, with the checkered stadium, dude, you kind of expect them to come out guns a-blazing, and they really struggled offensively. So I know we'll talk about that as, I guess we'll talk about it right now because we're not talking about it later.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. But I don't know, man. You had a lot to say about this, and I was kind of stumped, dude, because I was so high on Nico, and I think I was trying to think of a reason why, and then I just said it out loud to you. I was like, dude, he's 19 years old. Let's not forget it. This kid is 19. He is a freshman. This is his 6th career start. Let's hold our horses here. Let's pump the brakes. Everything's gonna be okay. The kid can still ball. He's just young, and playing Florida at Tennessee, bro. That's Florida Tennessee, dude. Think about the games in the past. That's the biggest game of his life so far, especially coming off of a loss.
Totally. I like to. Yeah, I'd like to really dive into the psyche of players, as you guys well know, and at least through what I observe and what I feel, because quarterback is such a deep mental game and such a deep spiritual game. And I think, to Mitch's point, I think where Nico kind of screwed himself, but it's a good thing, it's a good thing, is he played so well in the bowl game against one of the top defenses in the country in Iowa, and he has a very stoic presence about him. Just you don't see him affected emotionally. You won't see it in his body language. You won't see it in the way he carries himself. And then the first game of the year this year is a primetime game because everybody knows, that NC State's a really good football team, especially their defense. They haven't been near as good this year. And in that first game of the season, he comes out and he looks like an All-American. And then he plays well against Oklahoma. And so the tone he set in those first 3 games was that he's a 27-year-old. And he's 19. And then the last few weeks, he hasn't had as much success. They haven't been near as explosive on offense. And then what I was talking to Mitch about is you go on the road to Arkansas and you get punched in the mouth. They got punched in the mouth. As a team, they got punched in the mouth. But for freshmen, and Mitch and I have both been there, and I was playing as a true freshman. I was playing at 18 years old. It's you have an ignorance that is this thing that's really special about you. You don't even know that you bleed yet type thing. And then you go on the road, you drop a game as the number 4 or 5 team in the country against a team that's unranked, and you don't look the same and it doesn't feel the same. And the chatter around your name for the first time changes a little bit, and you got introduced to what this thing feels like and looks like when shit's not good.
Yeah.
And now you come back for a game against a Florida team that has more momentum than they had early in the season. So they believed that they were going to go into Tennessee and beat them. And what I saw him affected. You still didn't see it much in his body language. It was reflected in his play.
Yeah.
What we talked about at the beginning of this season was his accuracy. That every ball he threw was not only there, it was right where it needed to be, giving the receiver information.
Yeah.
And he was putting different paces on the ball, and so when you watch a guy who looks that way, so much so that we're on here talking about it like that, miss a couple wide open guys in easy situations, like that's where you go, what's going on there?
Yeah.
And we're not going to overstate it. That's not our job. That's not what we're here to do. But all I know is it looks and feels different. And in the SEC, it don't get any easier. You got Alabama and Jalen Milroe coming in there next week. So number 7 and 8 in the country, that's going to be a tough football game, and it'll be interesting to see how the young kid responds.
For sure.
Because there's now been a couple tough weeks in a row. Speaking of Jalen Milroe, Bama and South Carolina, not used to seeing Bama lose a game. Not used to seeing them lose to Vanderbilt, obviously. And so you come into the week back at home, but you're in that early morning slate, which feels a little different. And you got a South Carolina team with a really good defense and kind of a hard hat football team on offense too. Just like they're not going to beat you in the passing game much, but they have an extra number because of how good their quarterback is at the line of scrimmage. So Mitch, what'd you see in that Bama South Carolina game? Because we're talking 27-25, guys. And the reason it didn't go into overtime was because of a missed throw on a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. So what'd you see, and what's going on in Tuscaloosa, Mitch?
Yeah, you're not used to seeing. First of all, you never think Vandy's going to beat, Alabama. Then it happens, and shout out to Vandy having an awesome year. But you never think that's going to happen. Then just in typical Alabama fashion, if they lose a game the next week, whoever they play next is just cooked. Like you're going to lose by 56. Like you're going to get housed. And it was another close game. It was another close game, and I don't want to say they were looking ahead to Tennessee, especially after a loss, and I just don't think that's how Kalen DeBoer is going to coach a team. I think the guys at Alabama always seem to be super focused. But yeah, definitely interesting for sure. I don't really I can't really pinpoint why I think it's going that way, but I will say, as I was watching that game, I never thought they were going to lose just because of the calmness I saw from Jalen Milroe. Yeah. And again, that just proves to me that he's one of the best players in the country. Like dropping 2 in a row at Bama, I mean, that doesn't happen. And just to South Carolina and Vandy, like, no way. And just to see his calmness throughout the whole game, and I never thought they were going to lose just because they had him on the field. So, he is super impressive. But you kind of mentioned earlier, before we got on the pod, that you seem that you felt like they were trying. You mentioned that you felt like they were trying too hard coming off of a loss. And we kind of changed subject right after that, but I was interested in what you meant by that, so I'd love to hear it now.
Yeah, I just mean by that like there's 2 ways to look at this thing, or 2 dynamics that are going on. One is like, obviously they know they lost to Vanderbilt, and that was a historic upset, and you're hearing about that all week. You're talking about it as a team all week to make sure that your energy is right when you come in against South Carolina in a tough SEC matchup on Saturday morning. Well, I think like what I assumed and what most assumed, and what Nick Saban even talked about when he was talking to Pat McAfee this week, was like that he said, like, when we lose to a team that we shouldn't lose to, like, I loved my guys up because they needed that. Like, when we won big games was when I broke my foot off in their ass.
Yeah.
And so it's like they're talking about just having the right energy. They're also talking about making a statement, and that they want to beat the shit out of South Carolina so everybody knows that they're still Bama.
Yeah.
And I think when you don't, they scored that touchdown on the first drive, but right after that, they start taking punches. And I think as they took a couple of those punches, now what creeped in, and why I said that, was now you start to go, oh shit, this isn't going to happen again, right? Like we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. And that goes from being the aggressor and the hunter and like stepping on a throat the way that you would have in the past, to now like just making sure that Vandy 2.0 doesn't happen again.
Exactly.
And even though they felt that they were separated, like we felt that they were separated in the game, you're still going like, I hope this doesn't happen, dude. I hope this doesn't happen. And so just that alone changes the dynamic in which you play the game. But I fully expect to see their best football here next week against Tennessee. I think the interesting thing for me is just watching an Alabama football team that South Carolina was running the ball pretty well. And Vanderbilt ran the ball very well.
Yeah.
When's the last time we've seen people run the ball well against Alabama? That's one of those deals that, I'm just curious to see how that continues to unfold in the season. We got so many games here, dude, because we still got 2 more left here, and we're 25 minutes into this deal. But you go Penn State, USC, and just thinking about, Penn State's on a long road travel trip. They're on a completely different time zone. It's a different game for that team as you take the field there in Trojan Stadium, and you're down 20-6 at halftime. And you come back, you take it to overtime, and you win the game in overtime. A bunch of missed field goals and things like that. But, Mitch, just talk about what that means to that Penn State football team as an undefeated football team going on the road in a big matchup against USC, down 20-6. What does that mean to a football team? What did you see for Drew Allar and company out there?
Yeah, I mean, for Penn State, first of all, getting some revenge on USC is huge. They feel like they're always playing USC in the Rose Bowl, and have had some classics. But, Penn State's they're very similar to me as like a Notre Dame, and what I mean by that is they're always going to win 10 games, but they struggle to win the big one.
Yeah. And
this is not their big one. Their big one's, at Ohio or home versus Ohio State in a few weeks, but it is a big win for Penn State. There's a lot of times where you see Penn State win the games they should and lose the games they should. And now they were favorites going into this game, but going on the road to a very good, underrated USC football team and getting a win, that was big for their program. And Drew Allar's a big kid. He's a big kid. He's physical. He's a good runner. And mechanically, I think he's pretty sound. Just watching him throw the ball. I do get a sense of and we've talked about this before. I get a sense that he's a little too big. I think sometimes he gets a little clunky.
Yeah.
And here I am fucking sitting on this podcast talking about the quarterback, trying to quarterback for the number 5 team in the country. But I'm a fan of him. I think he's a good player, and I think they have a great defense. Typically, they struggle a little bit this week, and they run the ball super well. And I think they've kind of become more of a typical Big Ten team as the years have gone by. They're running the ball a little bit more and having a really good defense. But I still think in Beaver Stadium they have a shot to beat Ohio State. I really do. They have to play their best game. But they still have a shot.
I think what I was surprised with, or what was awesome to watch, playing for Franklin back in college, is the narrative that he's fighting at Penn State, Mitch just alluded to, which is they don't lose games that they shouldn't lose, but they also don't win games that they should lose.
Exactly.
And so Penn State fans are kind of going nuts because they know they have this great coach that's going to win double-digit games every year, but he can't beat Ohio State or Michigan and won't win the big one. And so when you're on the road against USC and they have you down 20-6 at half, the team's aware of narratives like that. You don't live those narratives, but you're aware of those narratives. And what I thought unfolded was when I saw Drew Allar's stats, it's he threw 3 picks, first of all. So that's a little sketchy, right? But he threw for 391 yards. Yeah. And when I watched the game, it didn't look hard, the 391 yards. And they have 2 incredible running backs. Yes. Their offensive line is super physical. And then I think the most underrated, underspoken about player in the country right now is Tyler Warren. Their bare hands, no gloves, tight end, who's just a fucking animal, dude.
Dude, I went on – Tyler is from Virginia. He's from Richmond. He's a my grade. He was a quarterback in high school. We went on 15 visits together, I swear to God. So many visits.
And what was the guy like?
Dude, super quiet.
Quiet.
Super, super quiet. But
he don't play quiet. Let me tell you that.
No, but he was a phenomenal athlete, dude. We would go run the 40, and he'd smoke me. And he's 6'5", 240. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck?
Dude. But 17 catches for 225 yards, bro.
Bro, he's a dog. He is a dog.
Dude.
And they put him everywhere, bro. Put him everywhere.
Oh, 100%. But
hell yeah.
Put him and Scattaboo, that running back from Arizona State. And you're just going with the all hands 1960s team.
100%. 100%.
But, anyway, that was so I just think Penn State's found a bit of their identity. And it's going to be interesting because we're going to find out that first week in November what their identity is. But really looking forward to that. And then last one, just cleaning up the last game of the night, was Colorado against K-State. And it was a really good game. K-State jumped out early. Then Colorado pounced on them and got up. Then K-State answers the bell, goes on the drive late in the game, and then obviously Colorado wasn't able to make it happen. But what do you think? You know, Colorado's this team that is so polarizing that everybody talks about, and they got one of the top quarterbacks in college football for sure, and Dion and the whole deal. But then you have one of our favorite coaches on the other sideline, just in terms of the way he goes about his business and the way his teams play. Like, what'd you observe in that game, Mitch? What do you think about both their seasons kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I think, Kansas State is probably the favorite to win the Big 12. I mean,
so.
Iowa State is going to be good.
Yeah.
And my sleeper to sneak into the playoffs at 11-1 is Texas Tech. I think they got a shot. They got a super friendly schedule down the road. They don't play Kansas State, but they do play Iowa State. So Texas Tech's my sleeper. Just going out there saying it now, getting on record. But yeah, I mean, it was a great football game, dude. And as much as we hear from Colorado, you have to give them credit because they are playing real college football, competing with really good teams, and they're in it. That was a 3-point game. Like, they're in it, and that Kansas State is a really, really good team, probably a playoff team, if we're being honest, just because they're going to win the Big 12, probably the favorite to win the Big 12. And Lance Leipold is a phenomenal coach, and to lose to a Lance Leipold team by 3 points, dude, was it at
Colorado.
Yeah, at Colorado. So
at Colorado.
Yeah, shout out to Kansas State for pulling that off, but and I don't know. Colorado is exceeding a lot of expectations, and Shedeur Sanders, I looked at his career stats last night. Dude, he has like 14,000 total yards and 128 touchdowns. Like, that is it's not quiet because it's out there at Colorado, but like, I don't think people understand the numbers that he's put up. And I understand that too. We're at the FCS level FCS level.
Yeah.
But still, dude, those are some phenomenal numbers. I think we have to give him a little bit more credit than what he's been given.
Well, he's getting credit from the national media. I think, we've had a lot of doubts just as quarterbacks, and I think a lot of quarterbacks feel this way, and we were talking about it before the show, is like there's, at least on my end, I'm just going to be candid and say it, is like there's a little bit of jealousy, like as I watch that guy play, because he doesn't look like he's getting coached hard. And what I mean by that is there's just a lot of freedom in the way he plays the position. His drops, guys. Like, try to tell me that he's taking the same drop every time. It looks completely different every single play. He's backpedaling a lot of the time. He's dropping back 40, 50 times a game and getting to spread the rock around, running true full field concepts constantly. And like, it looks like it's really fun to be him, honestly. Yeah. And he deserves it after he got his ass kicked last year by all those sacks. I mean, they're literally averaging, giving up like 6-7 sacks a game. But to your point, not to take any of the shine away from the big picture of what Colorado's doing, is like Colorado 2 years ago was clearly one of the worst 5 teams in all of college football.
Yep.
It was bad. And that stadium was barren, and their roster was barren. And 2 years later, they're 4-1, competing with one of the best teams in the conference, and K-State had to take that game from them. It's sold out in there, like absolutely nuts, and they have one of the top quarterbacks in the country and one of the top overall players in the country in Travis Hunter. So just big shout out to Colorado and giving them some props for what they're doing. And I look forward to seeing it the rest of the season. And we got another big week this week in college football. I'm really circling, obviously, the Texas-Georgia game in Austyn. I'll be 20 minutes down the road. I don't have enough money in my bank account to figure out how to get a way to get there right now. But I'll be watching. And then Alabama at Tennessee is going to be another big one. Mitch, you got to lean in those 2 games, dude. What do you think?
Definitely Alabama. Definitely like Alabama in that one, even on the road. And then Texas-Georgia, dude, I don't know. I think it's hard for me because I'm like, Georgia will win that game because it's Georgia. And Texas is kind of like this new powerhouse on the block, but dude, they look different. They look different. So I don't know. It'll be a good one.
It'll be a physical one, dude. We'll find out a lot about Ewers and Beck and kind of the direction of, at least for Georgia. Like, this is When's the last time Georgia lost 2 games in the regular season? Like, it's been a minute. So this one's going to be fun. But that wraps up college football just overall in week 7. Again, love you guys dropping into the comments and talking to us about, throw some dirt at us, throw some love at us. But, we're here for all of it, dude. Trust me, we've taken worse. All right. Yeah. Mitch, you got anything else for him?
See you guys in the next one. Peace.
See you with quarterback standouts of the week.